Hello all, welcome to this IB biology video tutorial focusing on plant structure. The essential idea is related to section 9.1 of your textbook or your PDF. That idea is that the structure and function are correlated in the xylem of the plants. So we are focusing mainly on structure. You will deal with the function of the xylem and water transport in class. A quick photosynthesis review. We looked at this quite a bit in Bio 2, so please consider this. We know that photosynthesis involves carbon dioxide plus water with the energy taken from light and in the presence of chlorophyll and chloroplasts in the plant, creating glucose, which is our energy source, the release of oxygen, and also water. And we can see that represented here in this very simple diagram. We've got water coming in from the soil, carbon dioxide coming in through the leaves, the energy from the sun creating the food, the glucose, or the sugars. And we can also see there the release of oxygen. Please review this before we move on. Our first understanding is that transpiration, which is the movement of water, is the inevitable consequence of gas exchange in a leaf. So we'll explain this over the coming minutes. We know that plants are essential for life on Earth. They produce oxygen and also carbohydrates, and they also absorb carbon dioxide from the atmosphere through the process of photosynthesis. They are autotrophs, if you remember, and heterotrophs rely on the energy that they produce. The plant kingdom is highly diverse. However, we will mainly focus on the more highly evolved plants which contain vascular tissue, which is composed of xylem and phloem. Today we are mainly dealing with xylem. Here we see a variety of different plants. The bryophytes that you can see on the left-hand side there are considered non-vascular. We are mainly dealing with angiospermatophytes and mainly the flowering plants during this section. And you can see here the vascular tissue on the right running through the center of the plant, that colored section, which is composed of both xylem and phloem. Okay, we're going to work our way through the leaf. We are going to look at the structure of the leaf and also the function of the different parts. First of all, transpiration, which is critical to our understanding of this topic, is the loss of water vapor or gas from the leaves. Generally, transpiration occurs through openings in the bottom of the leaf called stomata. Now you'll see the word stoma. This is just the singular version of stomata. And we can see our stomata down the bottom here. We'll talk more about those in a moment. First of all, we have the cuticle on the upper side here. We can see it's a waxy outermost layer. It protects the plant against water loss and also the invasion of different insects and pests. It's thinner on the bottom surface than the top, because that's the one, the top is the one facing the sun, the hottest area of the plant. The epidermis is the outer layer of the leaf, and you can see an upper epidermis here and also a lower epidermis. This protects the leaf if the cuticle is absent, and it's also positioned so that all the other leaf structures we mentioned are protected and supported. You can see that here. Okay, moving on. In higher plants, the ones we spoke about, the vascular plants, the stems and leaves contain vascular tissue, or veins. Now these are composed of xylem and phloem. You can see that on the right-hand side of the diagram. And basically they are there to transport materials up and down and through the plant. The xylem bring water to the leaves, which, as we've seen, is a reactant in photosynthesis. The phloem carries the products of photosynthesis, those sugars, to other parts of the plant which might be growing or carried away for storage in roots, for example. So that makes up the veins in the leaves. The next layer we'll talk about is the palisade mesophyll layer. This is the upper layer of cylindrical cells which may contain many chloroplasts. This is really important for photosynthesis. You can see it's located at the top of the leaf to ensure that it catches as much sunlight as possible. Below the palisade mesophyll, you can see there the spongy mesophyll layer. This is mostly the bottom portion of the leaf, and it's composed of loosely packed cells, so cells with air spaces in between. There are few chloroplasts. It's not heavily involved in photosynthesis, but these air spaces allow for gas exchange. So it allows for oxygen to move out, and importantly, it allows for CO2 to move in. It's located just above the stomata, where the CO2 will enter, and this allows channels for continuous gas exchange. Okay, back to the stomata, or these stomatal pores. They allow the exchange of carbon dioxide, which moves in, and oxygen, which moves out. However, they also result in the loss of water. So when the stomata are open, water in the form of gas, water vapor, can move out of the plants. We'll talk more about this as we move through the unit. It's located at the bottom of the plant because there is less light there, and there's also a lower temperature, so therefore there is less water loss when the stomata are open. The guard cells that you can see here are also essential. Now they are the cells which open and close the stomata, and the mechanism for that we will discuss in a moment. So that is essentially the structure of the leaf. If you need to pause and review this, please do now because it's very important moving on. Okay, plants require a constant stream of water from roots to leaves through the stem. And the xylem are very important here in transporting this water and minerals. Trees like a sequoia or the redwoods may need as much as 2,000 litres of water transported over 100 metres from the roots to the top of the plant, which is an immense task. Also, more than 90% of the water taken in by the roots is lost through transpiration. It's lost as water vapor through the stomata of the leaves, which is quite incredible. So only a small fraction of that water taken in is used for photosynthesis. Here we can see a very beautiful picture of the stomata. This one seems to be closed or slightly open, and you can see those guard cells surrounding it, those two guard cells. Here we can see transpiration on the leaf, probably in the morning. And this great picture gives a sense of how big these sequoia are. You can see a small child there, but a huge tree that may stretch over 100 meters above him. You imagine the immense mechanism or powerful mechanism that needs to drag that amount of water up that tree. Okay. We've seen that we need gas exchange during photosynthesis. We need CO2 to come in, and we see the release of O2 out. And this requires open stomata for this to happen. Now, the understanding is that transpiration is the inevitable consequence of this gas exchange in the leaf. However, we've seen that open stomata also result in water loss through transpiration. So the plant needs to balance stomata being open only for a short time. And we'll see this is particularly important for desert plants and those that live in arid or dry regions because they want to maintain as much water as possible. Okay, in terms of the stomata opening, when the water enters the guard cells, they become turgid or they swell, and they open. In the diagram, part A, we can see that the side of the guard cells facing the stomata is actually thicker. So this means that when H2O enters, they actually open. To close, the guard cells lose water, they become flaccid or they sag, and they actually close. And this results in no CO2 coming in and no water coming out. So when they're open, CO2 can come in and water can also leave the plant. Now we'll go a little bit further here and look at why those stomata will actually open or close, why the guard cells fill with water or do not. Guard cells are essentially controlled by the transport of potassium ions, and this is all related to osmosis and diffusion. To open, ATP-powered proton pumps actively transport potassium into cells. So this is an ATP or energy requiring process. Now as potassium moves into the cell, the higher solute concentration created by these potassium ions means that water also moves in through osmosis. Now to close, these active transport pumps stop, and the potassium ions, which now are in high concentration, move passively outside of the guard cells to low concentration. And as such, the water also follows by osmosis. The guard cells therefore become flaccid and sag and close. Really interestingly, the blue part of the light spectrum actually triggers the proton pumps and therefore the opening of the stomata. So in light, stomata are generally encouraged to open, but this is not the only control. Abscisic acid, which is a plant hormone, causes the rapid diffusion of potassium out of the guard cells. So if water is moving out, then the stomatas will close. Now roots produce this plant hormone when there is very little water, for example during a drought. So the effect of this hormone is to reduce water loss during dry times. Also, CO2 levels in the atmosphere and even a basic circadian rhythm, which is the 24-hour biological, affects stomatal opening and closing. Now a little bit about xylem structure. They are essentially composed of many cells, but two are really important, and we'll talk about those. Tracheids are dead cells, so they contain no nucleus and no cytoplasm, and they connect to form continuous hollow columns. So we can see here the diagram from your book. You can see they are hollow inside, and also they contain these pits that allow water to move between cells laterally, and also up and down the plant. They are also composed of these cells called vessel elements. Now these are also dead cells, but they are really special because they contain a substance called lignin. Now lignin provides great strength and also waterproofing, and we'll see why that is important when we look at the mechanism for movement up and down the plant. They also contain end walls with pores to allow a constant flow of water, so we can see that water moves laterally and also up and down through the xylem. And we can see that here, especially aided by the pits. So we've looked at the leaf structure, and we've looked at the xylem, which might flow through the leaves or through the stem or trunk of the plant. It's time to consider briefly the structure of roots. So we're looking at a roots diagram here from your book. Okay, roots generally function to provide mineral ions and water uptake through the xylem for photosynthesis, for the plant to function. They branch really widely, and they also contain root hairs, which you can see at the top of the diagram there, to increase the surface area of the roots and therefore the transport efficiency. Root structure consists of root hairs, which, as we've mentioned, increase surface area and also absorption by up to 3 times. They also consist of a root cap, which protects the growing root and particularly this sensitive apical meristem. We have a zone of cell division, which contains the apical meristem, and this is where new undifferentiated cells form, and this relates to the M phase or mitosis phase of the cell cycle, CC. There is also a zone of elongation. This is where those new cells enlarge, and this relates to the first growth stage of the cell cycle. And finally, we have a zone of maturation. Now, this is where the cells become fully grown and they are incorporated as part of the functioning plant. Now, this is a fairly quick look at root structure. I'd like you to consider the cross-section of the root in figure 9.6 as part of your homework. Okay. We are going to start looking at the mechanism for water transfer, and the first understanding here is related to the key cohesive properties of water and the structure of the xylem vessels. So what we've looked at so far, we have considered the structure of the leaves, the structure of the xylem in the stem or the trunk of the plant, and also the structure of the roots. So a lot of structural work here. Now we need to look at the function. We need to understand the mechanism by which water and minerals are transported from the soil into the roots, up the stem or through the trunk, and into the leaves for photosynthesis to occur. Now, this is called the cohesion tension theory of plant fluid movement. And this is something else I'd like you to do for homework, please. So in preparation for next class, we will form groups. You will sort of discuss and develop your understanding of this quite complex process, and together you will create a short presentation explaining this process to others. In order to be able to do that, please read through section 9.1, which relates to PDF pages 385 to 387. Please make notes on the following understandings related to the cohesion tension theory. So in short, you need to be able to look at that main diagram and explain it to other people. And here are the understandings related to that. I won't go through those, I'll let you read those in your own time. So please enjoy that. That's all preparation for next class. And all that's left to say is go for it. I hope you've enjoyed.